Welcome, Pewter Report readers, listeners, and viewers, to another edition of the Pewter Report podcast, energized by Celsius. I'm John Ledyard from PewterReport.com, and Kasey Hudson and JC
Heyo.
Allen are with me today on the show because it's a big show, ladies and gentlemen. It is. Chris Godwin has gotten the franchise tag again. And if you were hoping that this play could be avoided, so were we. But if you were hoping Carlton Davis would get tagged instead, not sure that was going to happen anyway. Unbelievably. We will talk about all of it on today's show. There's a lot to dive into here. Some very interesting stuff coming out that's Bucs related today, but not only just Bucs related. We've got Russell Wilson getting traded. We've got Aaron Rodgers going back to the Packers. We've got Carlton Davis probably hitting free agency, and the Bucs not really even trying to get to a deal with him before that point. Lots of stuff going on. And of course, we've got Josh Queipo making his Pewter Report debut as well today to talk about his Bucs battle plan, which I'm excited about. So what do you think, squad? It's been just kind of a normal, wound up, crazy Tuesday, and Chris Godwin is going to be a Buccaneer. But Kasey, what do you think? What's your initial reaction to him getting the franchise tag? Do you think he's going to be able to get to a deal that'll keep him around long term?
I'm thinking so. The hard part with franchise deals is that as much as it feels kind of like a mistrust issue or you're kind of waiting to pan out a few other things, it also does give you a chance to structure the best fit for both the player as well as the team. And there's just so many moving pieces this offseason for the Bucs. And, you know, Bruce Arians alluded to the fact that they're not rebuilding, they're polishing, and he really does want to bring back as many starters as possible, and their capital is in a critical position. So I trust the fact that this was probably at some odds the best decision. Do I love it? Absolutely not. I think that Chris Godwin just really deserved that trustworthy, let's make a deal. We want you here. You're a huge asset to our team right off the bat, rather than kind of playing around the negotiations of it all. So, but it's off season, and it wouldn't be off season without all the right drama. Here we go.
So true. We are into it for sure. JC, your reaction to this has taken us a little bit by surprise over the last couple of days. We really thought, A, the deal might get done, and B, that Carlton Davis would be a higher priority for the Bucs than it seems like he is.
Yeah, I'm going to channel my inner Scott and inner John here. What are you doing? You had a year to negotiate this deal. What are you doing? Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, you've had a full year to negotiate this deal. Well, not a full year. That's whatever. But you've had a behind the scenes to negotiate
over a year.
Parameters of this deal. Oh yeah, well, technically you have to stop negotiating.
Yeah, when you consider last.
Sure,
yeah.
But I mean, you've had plenty of time to hammer this out. And you know what? I'm going to blame
before last year.
I'm not going to blame the Bucs. I'm not going to blame Godwin's camp. I'm going to blame the Chargers and Mike Williams. I truly think they were probably close to a deal and, working on the, guaranteed money options. And then Mike Williams comes out with this ridiculous $20 million a year average on a 3-year deal where it's $60 million with 40 guaranteed to just say, oh, you guys are close. Yeah. Godwin's camp is like, nope, we're ripping this up. We got to get anywhere close to this, which is not what you want. Ideally. I mean, ideally you'd like to have, you can't pay Evans and you can't pay Godwin crazy money. You already are, but 16.5 million, 17 tops, I think is what you can realistically pay both of those guys. And even then you're still paying $33,000, $1 million a year on 2 wide receivers. So it's really difficult. It stinks that it didn't get done. I agree with Kasey. I don't think it's any sign of disrespect. If anything, it's like, hey, we want you here. You're important to us. I don't think, having Light and Bruce Arians going, I love Chris Godwin tour at the combine really helped the negotiating case. But yeah, I mean, it's difficult that they couldn't get done. They're so tied up against the cap. And I still think they do have the ability to get something done before free agency hits. These sides, obviously they were pretty close. Maybe they can come back together because you need that cap space. There's no doubt about it. To re-sign your own guys, to make splashes in free agency. Right now, you couldn't even sign your draft class. So you've got to be able to do something, and that's going to bring it down. And as far as Carlton Davis goes, man, I mean, talking pre-show, I have him at a certain number. It sounds like you're hearing a much higher number. It's to let him go out and test the market is just kind of insane to me. Even if slapping the franchise tag is a big number for a guy who hasn't been able to stay healthy, and really as well as he's been as a lockdown player and locked down some of the best wide receivers in the game, he hasn't been a huge playmaker. Yeah, he gets his hands on a lot of balls, but he doesn't he doesn't complete the catches.
Yeah, it depends how you define playmaking for sure. He needs to complete more catches, but in terms of getting their hands on the ball, there are a few corners in the league that do that more than him. And to me, that definitely falls under the umbrella of playmaking. With Carlton Davis, the situation is so unique, or so bizarre, actually, I should just say, because I don't understand where the Bucs are coming from with their sudden rationale on Carlton Davis. It's just come out of nowhere. They've been crazy high on him. They've all talked about how he changes their entire defense when he's out there. The narrative around Carlton Davis, top 10 corner from before the 2020 season, before he broke out. Then he had a great season. He played very well when he had in the 10 games this year. I would argue that these 10 games were his best football ever of his career. He just happened to miss 7 too with the quad injury. Yes, he's on the injury report, but a lot of it's like nagging short-term stuff. He plays through a lot of it. It's very strange to me that they could make this rationale about him, then all of a sudden go to Chris Godwin, who I absolutely want the Bucs to keep for sure, who's coming off a significant injury and has been injured, consistently, kind of same as Godwin, just nagging stuff, and rationalize making him a priority enough to tag him for the second straight year. I just don't understand where they're coming from with all that. I know they value Godwin, but man, losing Carlton Davis is just a massive blow. The fact that you could not get this done with Godwin is, by the way, not just the Bucs' fault. It is also the fault of Godwin and his representation for not being as responsive as they should have been. But both sides have to find a way to make it work in these situations and know when the deadline is. They got too close to it. They couldn't get it done. And now Carlton Davis is going to hit free agency. Pewter Report has learned there's no reason to expect him to get a deal from the Bucs before free agency opens. So Tampa Bay is going to risk losing him. He would have been $17 million on the tag. I think, to me, that suggests the Bucs don't want to pay him $17 million per year, and based on what we've heard, kind of seems to be where they're at. So if another team wants to, and I think another team will, Carlton Davis probably isn't going to be back with the Buccaneers. That's shocking to me. I didn't think we'd be saying that a couple days ago, but it seems like it's where we're at going into the end of this offseason. So really stunning stuff, and it has been an offseason from hell for the Bucs so far. Been some of it is that stuff they can't control. You can't control Tom Brady retiring or Ali Marpet retiring. Those things are out of your control. This was the first thing that was controllable so far in the offseason, and it just doesn't look like it's going the Bucs' way to kick things off, which is definitely a little bit depressing. Let's get to some of these questions. Leo with the $5 super chat. Think Godwin not only wanted money, but he also wanted to know what the quarterback situation was. Tagging him is a bad move. Bucs are not competing this year. I don't think he cared about the quarterback. I know people are still caught up on that. Yeah. We've addressed it a million times, but Kasey, this is, again, he's signing a long-term deal to be in Tampa Bay. He doesn't think that Gabbert's going to be his quarterback for 4 years in Tampa Bay. He's here because he loves it, because of the money, because of Mike Evans, those kind of things. I really don't think this is part of the situation. He wants fair money, and Mike Williams just got $20 million per year, even if the contract's weird. We'll talk to Josh Queipo about that in a second, but it just doesn't seem like that's the rationale here with Godwin.
No, I don't think that that's the case at all, because usually when you find guys that are just really hooked on what the quarterback situation is, it's because they tend to be more one-dimensional or need a very specific guy to help them improve their game. Whereas Chris Godwin is such an elusive and versatile wide receiver. He does very well managing with whoever is in the pocket for the most part. So I don't think that that's the weight of the situation at all. I think he's one of those players who's going to make the most of it, and he has the capability to do so. But you're also talking about, do you trust Jason? Do you trust Bruce Arians? They've had a good stride at building this team. And I know as a Bucs fan, it's really hard to go from, the building to not knowing what's going to happen when Jameis Winston left, to getting a guy like Tom Brady taking this team to a Super Bowl, getting close to this. I think everyone's still riding the high of chance of what happened and how things panned out. But I think we all kind of need to come back down to earth in the reality of the situation. We need to go back 2 seasons and kind of realize that's where the Bucs are still at. The Bucs just kind of had to take it a step back and rebuild from there. So I don't think it's a quarterback thing for Chris Godwin. And something that you mentioned earlier when it comes to Carlton Davis, the only reason I'm not too surprised is because I don't think that the whole gravedigger situation that everyone was excited to see this past season panned out. Those injuries were very telling, and we only know so much on our end, but I do trust that there might be something that the staff knows where it's like, okay, they are capable of losing a Carlton Davis and letting a guy step into that slot and still being just as effective. But they're going to have to make some hard decisions this offseason, looking into the next 2, 3, 4 seasons. I don't think the Band-Aid of what can we do to have a good season next year is going to work, because that's technically what they did by bringing back 22 starters. And while they became, NFC South champions and, still made it to playoffs and still did big things, I think that they know within that facility what it's going to take to actually compete next year, and to not just compete for 1 year, but to compete for the next 2-3 seasons to come.
Right. I think there's some premises in the chat I'm not really sure that I understand. Nathan says reality Bucs will be back to overpaying for average players. I don't really get this one. Where are they overpaying for average players, Nathan? Can you unpack this one for us? We're not seeing that. We're talking about them not paying for a good, very good player here, and maybe in a Carlton Davis, one that I believe they should be paying. But again, they've just made it harder for themselves by not being able to reach a long-term extension with Chris Godwin. JC, what's on the mind?
I think that's kind of silly. Obviously, there's been some history of, guys getting paid, more than they should. And then obviously,
the Bucs haven't handed out a bad contract in free agency literally since the Chris Baker, Deshaun Jackson offseason.
Exactly. So
that was years ago.
You're looking at guys who should get paid and deserve to get paid. And it's, as far as Godwin and the whole quarterback situation, I think you were talking about earlier today. I'm going to quote you on Twitter and saying, you're going with the franchise tag. There's a real chance that his numbers could possibly take a hit. He could get injured again this year. And, if he's signing a long-term deal, that's generational life-changing money that's guaranteed to you, so it makes more sense for him to take a long-term deal. And Jenna Lane of ESPN is reporting that they're still working on a deal, and they have high hopes they can possibly get it done, before the legal tampering period.
You're talking about Godwin.
About Godwin. As far as Carlton Davis, if he goes, it's not. I don't mean to disagree with you there, Kasey, but I don't think there's a soul here on the roster that can take his spot. And I've seen a lot of people out there saying free agency in the draft. There's a lot of good cornerbacks, there are some good cornerbacks in the draft. None of them that the Bucs are going to be able to grab at 27 that are going to be able to step in and do what Carlton Davis can do. None of them in free agency, that are going to be able to do what Carlton Davis do, unless you're paying for a J.C. Jackson or something like that over Carlton Davis. There's guys who could come in and be a filler and a stopgap, and maybe then, cornerback becomes a priority, and you do draft one high and have a year to develop them and see what you've got. But it's tough. And even if you did franchise tag Carlton Davis and you didn't come to an agreement, now you're heading into next year. And if Jamel Dean can stay healthy and play like the way, now you're looking at paying 3 cornerbacks potentially and having that whole roster turned over. So not signing Carlton Davis to me, and letting him hit the market is.
I don't think that they can be replaced. I just think that there's a much larger picture that they're trying to fill out here versus like bringing certain guys back. Because it doesn't make sense. I agree. Like, I thought Carlton Davis was going to be a priority. We know that this is somehow going to affect the Jordan Whitehead situation at one point. And then we've got Chris Godwin, who really does deserve to be here. So it's just kind of like I'm trying to put myself to figure out what are they foreseeing more than, the next season or the next 2, 3, 4 seasons out as to why they would risk Carlton Davis. Because we know that these guys also want to be paid. I mean, losing Tom Brady, losing Marpet, losing certain guys is placating into all of the free agents. It was like 30 minutes ago, all of a sudden Leonard Fournette's tweeting like it's in God's hands. Okay, well, this is a guy that I would love to see back in a Bucs jersey, but now what's the domino effect here as to why they're taking chances on certain players versus not? And I know that Bruce Arians said, or, you guys were talking about at the Combine, how Bruce Arians was saying they don't really want to pick up many free agents. They don't want to do many trades. It looks like they're trying to solidify a lot of the core of what they have now. So I think that there's just kind of a bigger thing to it.
Yeah, I believe that they are trying to solidify the core. It's crazy to me that Carlton Davis isn't seen as like an obviously vital part of that core, not only just from my own observations for the last 2 years of him clearly being a really good corner, or the fact that I know the demand out there for him is going to be great. So how the rest of the league sees him, but also how Tampa Bay has used him, shadowing number ones. You just don't see corners used like that, and then just kind of been like, unless it's like New England, for example, like they do that. That's the only teams that does. They're going to do that again with J.C. Jackson, but because they just don't believe players are worth paying for the most part. But most organizations don't operate like that, so it becomes very head scratching because the Bucs are such a straight up honest about their players. If they love them, they love them, and it's just what it comes down to at cap time. That's I think why this is most surprising. Joseph brings up a good point here. Have to ride it out with SMB. Yikes! This is the real truth of this situation. it's not only do you lose one of your best players on defense and one of your most important players at one of your most important positions potentially, but you also have to then play a player that is one of your worst players on the team. SMB is going to be playing. They're not going to replace two corners. It's very unlikely with all their other needs in the same offseason. So now SMB has to be playing major snaps again when he is clearly proven to not be good outside, regardless of the scheme. Now you've got to rely on him moving forward. Recipe for disaster in that way. He should be the player you're trying to replace this offseason. And obviously, Carlton Davis is not gone yet. We're just saying, like, this is going to make it hard for the Bucs to bring him back, especially if straight up, not that they can't bring him back, but they just don't seem to value him like I believe other teams on the market are going to value him, and Carlton's going to take the payday.
That's the thing, too. If you do have to move SMB outside, well, now you have a huge hole at nickel because it's a passing league, and most of the time they got three cornerbacks on the field.
That could be fine because they need a nickel. They need to upgrade.
I know they need an upgrade in nickel. I know. But I'm saying, well, I mean, now you got to throw a different guy in there, doesn't know the system, doesn't know the scheme, whatever, anything like that. Now, what do? Do you move Antoine Winfield Jr. into the slot, and now Mike Edwards is your guy? It opens up money to possibly keep Whitehead. There's so many domino effects of losing Carlton Davis in free agency, and it's not just losing him as a corner; it's losing what you have and your ability to use different players at different times and different positions and schematically versatility on the defensive back end too. So it's just, even so, because you can pretty much leave Carlton Davis on an island with some of these guys. Sean Murphy-Bunting's not going to do that. No. So now you're taking Antoine Winfield Jr. out of a playmaking position because he's going to have to help him over the top the whole time. It's unfathomable that they're just going to let him go and say, hey, tell us what you're worth and we'll decide if we want to match it or not. Yeah. The one thing that worked in the Bucs' favor for all these conversations about contracts, whether it's Kappa, Godwin, whatever, is thank goodness Florida doesn't have a state tax. And if these guys don't care about being the highest paid, you can rationalize it, say, well, you can get $16.5 million there. Well, we'll give you 15 here. And it's going to be a wash. And maybe that's a saving grace to keep some of these guys.
Yeah. There are other states too and other teams obviously with no state income tax, but it is an advantage the Bucs will have over some teams for sure. So perhaps that plays a role in it. We'll see. Leo says Chargers screwed the Bucs with the Williams deal. Very possible. I personally believe, based on everything we're hearing all throughout the day, Godwin was getting the tag no matter what. I don't think the Bucs were totally in the dark about what was happening with other players and contracts, and neither were Godwin or his representation. Those guys talk; they know what the deal is, and so I don't think it was like it caught him by surprise. If anything, it's just the wide receiver market may be going back up, and we'll see. And I think that'll be the situation they have to deal with. The Godwin tag was probably coming no matter what. Also, we need to be careful moving forward. There's no real reason, based on what Pewter Report's learned and what Scott reported in an article that just went up on Pewter Report about 15 minutes ago, that the Bucs weren't going to use that franchise tag on Carlton Davis, even if they didn't use it on Chris Godwin. So one did not result in the other. Let's put it that way. The two situations can be analyzed now separately, and I guess that makes the Chris Godwin tag not as big of a deal if we look at it that way. However, they need to get this cap number down for this year, and they will, I believe. It's not like they're up against the deadline to do that right now. They have a long time before they have to get compliance with that, but I definitely think, but it's going to help them knowing what that number will look like, or having
a week and a half number in a long time.
Well, I mean, you don't have to necessarily have everybody like locked in at a certain number at that point in time. Yeah, there's going to be movements that still happen in the cap. It's not like you don't have to like know exactly what that looks like at that point in time. You don't have to have it like actually finished at that point. You can work toward that. You can work toward that over time.
You do have to be cap compliant though once free agency starts, though, correct?
I don't know how compliant you have to be. I mean, I think you have to. We'll bring Josh Queipo on in a second.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
you're plugging so many holes. So I don't know where the compliancy, like where you're being held accountable for compliancy while you're still trying to fill certain gaps. I would kind of see that more on the back end of it. But
yeah, but we'll still have to work toward that.
The wide receiver market, maybe it's a stretch for me to say this, but I think just from how a lot of games were won this year and how a lot of things took place, like that wide receiver market, I think did kind of escalate a bit. When you think about conversations that took place revolving around heading into playoffs and Super Bowl, you're talking about guys like Cooper Kupp who have so much value and so much distinction in this league. Deebo Samuel, there's just so many wide receivers that stood out so much and that kind of upped the ante in this past season. I know that there's always great wide receivers, but I just kind of feel like there was just a little more gusto this season. Could totally be exaggerating it, but I mean,
But
if
you
that
might be right. It looks like that right now. It looks like
Yeah.
it's a possibility for some guys, at least. Last year was so weird. Kenny Golladay got the bag and everybody else just didn't. And then Golladay was just complete crash and burn, one of the worst deals probably in recent free agent history. And that would have, if anything, coupled with another good wide receiver class, to me would have pushed it back down. It doesn't seem like it's trending that way. I heard from a couple cap people after the Williams deal hit, and they were just like, whoa, got to see the guaranteed years on this. But this seems like the wide receiver market might be back, and they were not expecting it like that at all. So we will obviously see what happens. All this fun and craziness and non-funness. All of it is brought to you by our friends over at Celsius, because Celsius, as the title sponsors of the Pewter Report podcast, they power active lives every day with essential functional energy and a variety of wonderful flavors. I'm rocking the watermelon berry, the non-carbonated. It's healthy energy, natural caffeine. It accelerates metabolism, burns body fat, and has no sugar in it, yet has unbelievable taste. It is a G-code. You can see a variety of other flavors up there on your screen, but Celsius is terrific stuff. And by the way, you can check it out for yourself today. You can go to Celsius.com, use the store locator to find out where they are selling Celsius near you, or you can go to Amazon, do the subscribe and save option, get Celsius coming to your house on a regular basis, or click those banner ads over at pewterreport.com as well. That could be another option for you in terms of being able to add to the amount of Celsius that you have. Also, I would be remiss if I did not mention the fast protein bars. You can click the link that is in the YouTube description. 20 hold fast is the promo code. You can save 20% on fast protein bars by Celsius over on Amazon. The white chocolate cookies and cream and the salted caramel peanut crunch, they're both fantastic. You can get yourself a variety pack when you do this too. So you don't have to just try one. You can try both. But man, 20 grams of protein in one of these absolutely can replace a meal, can replace sweets, can help so much in terms of health and conditioning. So it's great stuff. Make sure you check out the fast protein bars as well. All right, crew.
What are you sipping on over there? Would you say watermelon berry?
Oh yeah, a little watermelon berry, my friend.
Great.
Watermelon I tried the cucumber lime, and it tastes like Sprite. I'm not a big soda or pop person, whatever you guys like to call it, but if I was, good? This is very Spritey for me. Yeah, it tastes just like a Sprite for me. And Celsius saves lives. That's not an advertisement. My life has been saved.
A couple people. Shane says Celsius is the bomb. I'm hooked. Haven't tasted a bad one yet. It's true, Shane. It really is wild how good they are. We welcome to the show for the first time Josh Queipo, the new Pewter reporter. Josh, what is up, my friend? It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm very excited to be on.
JC giving you sound effects and applause. I don't think I got that.
I know. JC's. It was like, JC, we could have used that a couple different times.
I feel very blessed. Thank you, JC. That was a great intro.
JC basically lives for the opportunities that he has to hit that soundboard and give us a little something we didn't have before from the sound. Oh, boy. Here we go. Josh, help us out here with the cap situation with Godwin. How long do the Bucs have to get him kind of compliant in terms of if they wanted to take that number down, and where do you think that number goes down to if they were to look at a long-term deal with Godwin? What do you think his 2022 cap hit is likely to be?
So as I understand it, they don't have to be cap compliant with him until he signs the contract. So that's a big thing, is when he actually puts pen to paper, that's when they'll have to be cap compliant. Teams have to be cap compliant at all times, and during the off season, it's the top 51 salaries that count against the cap because they are bringing on a lot of extra players over their normal 53-man roster throughout the season. So that's where you'll have the time. Godwin most likely won't sign the franchise tag as they try to work towards this other deal. That's the way I believe it is. I'll have to double check on that, but I'm almost certain that that's the case.
I think you're right about that because I'm pretty sure that makes sense. So they'll have ample time to get that number down, but it's still helpful, right, Josh? Because they need to know what that number will look like in order to be able to sign other free agents. If they're like, oh, you have to play on the tag, and then they get to, whenever he's going to sign the tag, which is like let's say mid-July, and all of a sudden they haven't been able to bring that number from 19.2 down to 6, for example, then all of a sudden you got to start cutting people. So
exactly,
right?
Yeah,
is that how it works?
They'll probably use the 19.2 kind of as it's obviously going to be a ceiling. No long-term contract that they are able to work out will have a cap number that's higher than that. It'll most likely come in lower, but they're going to use that kind of as a soft ceiling as they go through some of the other contracts.
So he's getting less than Mike Williams per year here. Is that what we're looking at? We're looking at a world like that.
For the first year, yes. So
Okay.
keep in mind if he goes to a long-term deal, that first year number is not going to be $20 million. Mike Williams' number in 2022 is not going to be $20 million. I was throwing around some figures in my head. I think Mike Williams this year is probably going to end up around a $12 million cap hit, even though the average over those 3 years is going to be at $20 million. So, and the same thing will be true of Godwin if they hammer out that big, a big deal. It's not going to be 19 or $20 million this year. The only world where that happens is if he signs the tag and they don't get the long-term deal done.
Interesting. And I know we all expected him to be back, but we've talked a little bit about the Carlton Davis situation. What would you say? I mean, now him hitting the market, what do you expect his price tag to be, and how much do you think that decreases his chances of being a Buck, just based on the fact that they seem like they weren't going to use the tag on him even if they got a long-term deal done with Godwin?
Yeah, that one's a little surprising. Overall, I think we were talking about it a couple weeks ago, and I said 4 for 65 or 4 for 70 seemed very in line with kind of the market, with JC Jackson being around there as well. And I don't think many people at that time thought JC Jackson was going to hit the market. I think a lot of people thought that the Patriots were going to use the franchise tag on him or potentially get a long-term deal. So with both of those guys hitting the market, it certainly creates a whole new dynamic to the cornerback market, because Stephon Gilmore was kind of the guy, but Stephon Gilmore is a little bit up there in age, and it was going to probably be a shorter pack. Now you have two young guys in the middle of their primes who, for all intents and purposes, are considered top 20 guys. And that's going to really alter the market overall. You're talking longer term deals for big money. John, I know you had just mentioned earlier in the podcast here that you were hearing some pretty big numbers. And that 4 for 70 I was thinking about, that may be on the low end at this point.
Yeah,
how does this affect your battle plan? These things that popped out today, like with Chris Godwin's situation and the potential of losing Carlton. I know all of us were like, "What the heck?"
That's
Jason
right.
So, this whole thing.
I think the biggest effect it has, Kasey, is that it means I'm not going to write my battle plan as early as I did this time next year.
Management forced you into it. For those who don't know, by the way, Josh Queipo's battle plan for the offseason, Bucs battle plan for the offseason. I will drop the link into the chat here for a second, but that went up about an hour before the Godwin tag hit. Yeah. Although we knew it was coming probably. So
yeah, I had most of it actually worked out a while back, and then I learned the hard way. Maybe I hold off on that and sending it in because
Josh got hired. That did you did your battle plan like 3 different times, 2 weeks at a time. But I appreciated,
yeah, it's helpful.
So what changes? What changes about that?
So I mean, looking at the reality, I did have Carlton Davis getting signed to a long-term deal. I think I did have it for 4 years, $70 million, and I did have Godwin signing a long-term contract, which based on the Mike Williams deal may come in very low versus what his value may end up being. So I think those are the 2 big changes. And depending on where those contracts end up, it means that probably some of the other unrestricted free agents that I was eyeing in my battle plan, I may not have been able to afford.
I was going to say, because where do you think that kind of manipulates or changes the other free agents on this roster? Because I know I keep repeating it, but I just keep circling back to the fact that Jason and Bruce want to keep as many of these guys as possible. Are there any free agents that you really see completely out the door now that, Carlton's going to hit the free agency market and Godwin with this tag? Because you got Leonard Fournette, you got these guys that everybody's so anxious to find out where they're going to go, what's going to happen.
Yeah, if anything, I think it could mean that they bring back more. So with Carlton Davis hitting the market and potentially signing elsewhere, that's a lot of money that they would have committed to him that they now have an opportunity to bring back, say, a Jordan Whitehead or potentially like a Leonard Fournette. So I think that it gives them the option to go with more bodies from their 2021 roster. Just when you look at their comparative performance, Carlton Davis, I would say, is in a tier above a lot of the guys that they would be able to bring in for the extra money.
Yeah. I mean,
it could be
guys, the big question is, do you want Whitehead back and Leonard Fournette? What guys would you want back and risk losing somebody else? I know this information before I submit my battle plan.
I'm fine to move on from Fournette. I'm fine. I want Whitehead back, but I'm fine to move on from Fournette. I'm fine to move on from Jensen. I would love to keep him. at the rate he's probably going to get. It's just for me, it's not worth it.
You don't want to chase a 31-year-old center to the top of the market.
Yeah.
I want to. I'm
things.
Josh too. I want to get rid of Josh. Josh had Josh Wells going. I'm all aboard the Josh Wells see you later train. At 31 years old, I appreciate that he filled in very admirably when you are banged up, when Tristan Wirfs. But there's other options out there that can come in at swing tackle and give you exactly what he.
But on one leg.
Oh, you think you would have been any better on two legs, John? Come on.
Yes, it would have been better on two legs.
All season for Josh
Wells. Would have been
Wells.
half as bad on two legs.
Every time Josh Wells entered the game, you and Paul would start. What are you doing in there, Josh Wells? Every time.
Yeah, he was trying to pass protect hopping on one leg. Go ahead, Josh Q.
I was just going to say one of the things, kind of going back to Kasey, what you said earlier in terms of the larger plan. As I'm trying to process this Carlton Davis decision that the Bucs made, I'm trying to think maybe they're thinking a year ahead. Maybe they are a lot higher on Jamel Dean than many of us think they are. Mm-hmm. And when they start thinking about who are we committing long-term money to, if they make a big commitment to Carlton Davis this year, and we expect that they'll make a big commitment to Antoine Winfield in a couple years, that probably doesn't leave them the room to go big on another corner. So if they're really high on Jamel Dean, they could be waiting for next year to get a long-term deal done for him, and they see him as that cornerstone and letting Carlton Davis go. So that's the one thing that's kind of been bandying about my mind on that one, in terms of maybe they're thinking 1 year ahead on that, and they think that Dean can rise into that role this year. Again, kind of going back to what you guys were talking about earlier, though, that does put SMB back into that starting outside role, which isn't ideal.
No,
see, I would rather pay Carlton Davis than AWJ right now. I just think you worry about Winfield Jr. when you worry about him. You got to keep Carlton Davis. It's just those cornerbacks aren't available often.
But some of that stuff has to, like that domino effect. Some of those things have to start now. I think the hard part with the Bucs and where their back is really against the wall is that all the injuries that took place this season were extremely eye-opening. Now, did we love how a lot of those games panned out? Absolutely not. But were there very significant plays that showed flashes of maybe we can bet on this versus that? Maybe this can actually play out to a bigger effect down the line. I think that they're seeing something else there because Carlton Davis was out for a while. Jordan Whitehead stepped up in so many ways. I'll admit, I didn't even realize how not only versatile, but how effective Jordan Whitehead was for a while until a lot of those people started going down. And then you see him being moved here and being so effective.
Kasey, are you saying
you can get less money?
Yeah. Are you saying Carlton Davis being injured opened the door for the Bucs to see that maybe he's not as valuable as they thought he was the year before?
Yes.
And that he's
and
more
I think that they're looking, I think that him being out made him look replaceable because they're thinking, okay, we gave, Dean more time. The more confidence that guy got, the better that he ended up playing. And in certain games, a lot of us were like, crap, rely on him more, use him more, give him the reps.
That's true.
But because of how his resume and his career started, they don't have to pay him what they pay a Carlton Davis, and they might not have to do it anytime soon. And he's one of those guys who's just going to be grateful for the opportunity that he's not going to be asking for much. Because you have to think that too. Like a lot of these guys, there's a maturity and a mentality that plays into all this contracting. For instance, somebody asked about Leonard Fournette. I think Leonard Fournette matured so much in Tampa, and he had so many eye-opening experiences here that the guy who just wanted to be paid last season, he's not going to particularly be that guy. He wants money, but he's not going to probably bat super high as he did beforehand. And I mean, I had personal conversations with him about it. And I think a lot of what the staff gave him on a mental level brought him down just a little bit. And I think that might.
You're talking about Dean, or who are you talking about here?
I was using Leonard Fournette as an example.
Oh, Leonard Fournette as an example.
Guys, when it comes to talking about contracts down the line. Yeah. So Dean's not going to. Dean just seems so excited to play football. I don't think he's going to be asking for much anytime soon.
That's why if Carlton Davis goes, I would, I brought this up, and John and you and Scott kind of disagree with me, but if Carlton Davis does leave, I think you could steal Dean on a 3-year deal, like $24 million. Sign him now before he proves that he's a top cornerback and hits the market next year. You have to franchise tag him if Carlton Davis goes.
Well, there's a lot of factors to look at here. I'm not totally disagreeing with you, Kasey, because I do think it's possible. The reality is the Bucs won most of their games when Carlton Davis was out, but it's really important to take into consideration the fact, I think, if you're the Bucs, that they played the worst slate of passing offenses in the NFL last season. And by far, it wasn't even close between them and the next second closest team. So that was a factor with their defense. And it was even more of a factor during the stretch Carlton Davis was out when they were facing the bottom tier passing offenses in the NFL, and they were surviving still, but it wasn't necessarily pretty. And I do think his value to the team was clear in that way, although the results of the game didn't necessarily, it wasn't like they dropped a ton of games once that happened. I still think his value is clear to the team. I hear what everybody's saying about Dean, but like we're talking about a guy that Carlton Davis, they don't think he can stay healthy. Dean went out like 6 different times last year, like 6 different games with different injuries. That dude has not been able to stay on the field for the last 2 years. I mean, I don't think it's anything a major issue, but if that's a concern with Carlton Davis, who's been better and more consistent than Dean, then it should be a concern with Dean as well moving forward. Not to mention the fact Sean Murphy-Bunting has been pretty much a nightmare when he's played. Dean made improvements, but we are still a long way away from talking about a guy that we're ready to lock into any significant money. And I think that's worth mentioning there too.
And don't get me wrong, I don't want anyone to go off the deep end here. I'm not saying Dean is better than Davis. I'm not even saying that they're on the same playing field. I'm just saying in terms of money down the line, how, depending on how much Dean's confidence grows, the player that he has the potential of growing into, you have to think a lot of contractual things are based on potential. So that's what I mean by the Bucs might just see a different potential in Dean in terms of what the team's going to look like that later down the line versus now. I'm not saying that Dean is better than Davis. I'm not even discounting Davis. I think he's a massive
I got you.
The secondary.
I think too, and the chat is full of just Debbie Downers saying, "Oh, we're going to be at 500," and we're just
at least wait till free agency happens.
Why are we talking about a cornerback when we don't have a quarterback? Well, that's part of the problem, right? If you're not going to have a quarterback, if you're rolling with Blaine and Kyle and Griff as your 3 quarterbacks this season,
use the money.
You need to have a good, solid defense, an elite defense, especially if you're talking about winning the division. I mean, you have to be able to fortify your defense if you're going to have a subpar quarterback. And if Trask does turn out to be the guy, he's on a rookie deal for 2 more years. Think of all the money you have to invest in those guys, and you just have to take advantage of that while you can. I mean, you're looking at the Falcons, who are begging someone to trade for Matt Ryan to get out of that. Their team is in shambles with Calvin Ridley gambling away his life. You've got the Saints, who are in the same position, over the cap, no quarterback. And now the Panthers are just trying to get rid of the only good player they have. They're trying to trade Christian McCaffrey away. So this division is right. Come to Tampa. The division is ripe for the taking. And if you're not,
Moore is a good player. DJ Moore is a good player. I just like to say that. But
all right.
Josh, let's get back to your battle plan here, because you, like Scott, do not have the Bucs acquiring a quarterback, really. I mean, a quarterback of note anyway. Scott did have them drafting one later in the draft, but you need to ride in the Blaine. What's that, Kasey?
If I see Trask in his battle plan, I'm going to burn it.
Oh, what are you going to cut Trask, Kasey? Is he not going to be in your battle plan? Are you cutting him?
He's not touching the field next season.
Wow, Kasey's out here absolutely aligning herself with Florida State truthers.
So Kasey's going to have to get her lighter ready because the approach that I took was re-signing Blaine Gabbert, and basically, you're going to start the year with him, and if the season goes well in a down NFC South, sure, he can continue to be our starter, but if it doesn't look like it's going to go very well there, that we do transition to see what we have in a Kyle Trask. So, and not mortgaging the future for any average starters, and understanding that, especially you saw the trade today for the reported trade for Russell Wilson, that we just don't have the bullets in the chamber to go out and outperform in a trade like a Denver or some of these other teams that have higher picks than the Bucs do. So your Russell Wilson's off the table. Your Aaron Rodgers is off the table. I'm not willing to give up similar packages for Derek Carr or Kirk Cousins. So what does that leave us with? That leaves us with Blaine Gabbert, and finally figuring out what do we have with Kyle Trask later in the season. So that
let me ask you this:
the way that I went with that one.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. It's realistic, and I think that's important to distinguish here. Let me ask you this: Mike Evans, you have him getting a contract extension, 2 years, $35 million, $25 million guaranteed, adding 2 more years onto his deal. He's under contract 2022 and 2023 right now, so you would have him locked up through 2025, and he'd be a free agent in 2026. at that point he'd be, I'm trying to do it in my head. What is he, 32 or 33 years old, something like that, I believe, because is he 28?
Yeah, I think that would be around
so
there.
I think
Yeah,
somewhere around there. So closer to the end of his career. At that point, it's like Levante David. You'll just tack a year on if he wants to keep playing, type of thing, probably.
Yep.
Do you think this is realistic? Like, I know these battle plans, by the way, for people who don't know, we try to keep them realistic, but also what we would do. It's like a combination of both. We don't want to go crazy like they're going to trade for Patrick Mahomes, but we also don't want to do like a situation where we're talking about, things that are things that we think just the team would do and not what we would do, because then they lose their uniqueness. So do you think this might get, is this just what you want to happen? Or do you think this is like, is he in a real position, 2 years left on his deal? It'd be kind of unusual, but could they really extend him this offseason?
I do. I think that they could. I think that it's probably something that they're looking into. It can help them from a cap standpoint this year. It helps to ensure that, like Levante David, there's a good likelihood that he spends his entire career in Tampa Bay. Given who Mike is in the locker room, what he's been as a player, and who he is in the Tampa Bay community, I think that it's a no-brainer from that standpoint. Up until about 3 hours ago, I thought the numbers were great. And then Mike Williams happened, and maybe I'm a little optimistic on what those numbers look like. And that's really, I think, the only unrealistic standpoint of that is what this Mike Williams contract is going to do to wide receivers across the league.
Right.
I agree. I agree with Josh. I think Mike Evans is a prime candidate to get extended this year. I have them extending him myself. I have him a little less. I think he's going to come in around 16.5. I know you had him around 17.5.
16.5 is what he makes now, by the way, for people.
Yeah, just extending that 2 years out. So I think, this is a guy who says it's not about the money. I know it's not about the money for him. It's about, more so it's about finishing his career as a Buck and letting the Bucs do things. He's always been one of the first players they've gone to restructure, which benefits him because he gets the money up front. But I think he's definitely a candidate. I think Smith, too. Donovan Smith could get another year tacked on to kind of stretch out those cap hits and bring his number down as well. So.
Pretty soon, Donovan Smith's going to be under contract till age 40.
I'm not the only one saying that, man. Even
I went a little bit different than
I'm not saying I'm not
on Donovan Smith. Rather than extending, I just went with a basic restructure for Donovan. So
it seems maybe more likely at this point, but yeah.
Okay,
I got to ask you about Juju Smith-Schuster. What's happening? Because you have the Bucs signing Juju Smith-Schuster, 1 year, $7.5 million. I don't think people realize that this. I don't know if they bring back. Obviously Godwin's coming back, so I don't know how realistic it is that they'll spend that kind of money. But such a good fit. It just seemed to make a lot of sense to me. I had this on. I wrote about it probably 2 months ago for the first time, but I think that this one might have some real legs, right?
Yeah, and kudos to you for putting me onto it. I think Juju plays a perfect complement into the system. The Bucs play a lot of 11 personnel. That third wide receiver is very important. We saw what that looked like when you have a high-level talent on the field like AB, and then we saw what that looked like when you didn't have a high-level talent on the field when Godwin went down and when AB went out, how that offense changes. And so getting a reliable talent like Juju, and for that kind of price, I mean, that could be a huge bargain. He's coming off of a down year where he got hurt, and that was on a 1 year, $8 million deal. That's why I think I had him in there for 1 year, $7.5 million. Because the injury pulls back some of his value, he becomes a huge opportunity for the Bucs to strike rich on that.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Okay, we're going to go around real quick and let you know, and you can respond to as we go through. How about we each let Josh know our favorite part of his battle plan and our least favorite part of his battle plan? Or Josh, are you welcoming these compliments and criticism? Are you ready for it?
I tweeted about it. Let's see if you guys like what I can roll with.
Okay, I'll give Kasey. I'll give you a second to look. Kasey, I'll give you a second to look. I'll go first, and then Kasey, you can go after me, and then Kasey will finish with you, and then we'll let Josh get out of here. But one of my favorite parts of the battle plan that we haven't mentioned is Maurice Hurst on the $1.5 million deal, because he's exactly what the Bucs are looking for. They want to get quicker and more explosive at defensive tackle. When he's been healthy, he's done that. For this low rate, you take a risk on his health, but he's been a really good player when he's been on the field. He was a top 10 player for me in that class. He fell because of the heart thing. He's been great when he's been out there, but he hasn't been out there enough. So he needs to be out there for sure. If you're spending big money on him, obviously I'm opposed, but he is going to be very cheap. He fits exactly what they're looking for as a rotational player. He'll play 20, 25 snaps a game. He gives them the penetrating type of player that Bruce Arians was talking about. So I'm all about that. potential fit. One I am out on, not because the price isn't that significant. I'm out on the Jared Cook addition to the Bucs because of his age, not really fitting the window as much, and the fact that he doesn't block worth squat. I think Bruce Arians will be furious at this dude at the first practice. It'll toss him out of there. So that's my feedback thoughts there. JC, what do you got?
Oh, I got a couple of them. First of all, we're on like the same line.
No, one each. Don't be blasting this guy.
Hold on.
No.
If he's got a couple of good ones, let's
JC.
roll with it. If he's got a couple of things he doesn't like,
All
let's
right.
limit it to one.
I'm gonna go with the good one. I was giving the good ones first. I was gonna say,
I don't want him to get a big head either.
We're on this mind melt thing. I think we have the same idea going on with your second round pick.
Right, Josh.
And also special teams. Yep. See you later. I think we got that going on too. The same. So there's definitely some things we have in common on our things, and I think everyone will have some things in common. I gotta agree with John though. I'm not a huge fan of Jared Cook, and the biggest thing is I don't know if you can replace Jordan Whitehead. I liked your reasoning with getting Kirby in the third round, Kirby Joseph in the third round, and allowing Antoine Winfield to play more along the line of scrimmage and everything like that. But I think Whitehead is just so important to what this team does, and I don't think he's going to have a robust market just because of the type of safety he is, and because quite frankly, the NFL is paying a boatload of safeties right now. There's over 20 guys making over $8 million, and I just don't know if there's enough money for another team to be like, oh, let's put it all in on another guy. So I think I would rather keep Jordan Whitehead around. I'm with you with Joshua. See you later. But I do like the reasoning behind it.
Yeah. Whitehead was one of the hardest for me. And actually, I think a couple of readers pointed out, I ended up not doing anything with him. I didn't have him as somebody we didn't re-sign. I didn't have him as somebody we did re-sign. He didn't end up on my way too early 53. So some astute readers.
He wasn't on your final roster, so I just added him to the not re-signed.
Yeah. So they were very astute in that. And he was the last one. And it just came down to, with everything else that I wanted to do, I couldn't afford him. I love Whitehead. I love what he brings to the defense in terms of his physicality. And you know, that Jets game, I think it was, or it was the Panthers game towards the end of the season, he just took it over, and he brings that to the team, and I love him. I just couldn't afford him. That was the biggest thing. So I completely agree with you, JC. I'd love to see him back on the roster next year.
All right, Kasey, what do you got for him?
Oh man, no, I'm kidding.
Got that lighter ready.
Brings out the red pen. The red pen. Bruce Arians rumored to take to buy him up with game plans.
Josh, welcome to the team.
Thank you.
No, I agree with just about all of your unrestricted free agent no size. This is gonna be my new thing.
Well, let me see here.
Wait.
Let's rip this thing to pieces.
I like
I'm sorry.
Glasses. Okay. I don't see Jordan Whitehead going anywhere. If we're really going to talk about any kind of key asset to the secondary, it's him more than anybody. Special teams. Now, maybe growing up a Bucs fan, seeing a lot of how the Bucs situations worked out, the curse of the kicker, Ryan Suckup reversed that. Whether we love how he performed this past season, like that kicker curse was pretty brutal. And when he came in last season, he gave everybody so much hope. So I don't see the entire special teams unit just being like bye-bye, unless you're going to find a way to fire Darden. Then you guys know where I stand there. I do like the tight ends that you want to bring in, because I would love to see a lot more realistic 12 personnel or just some real tight end work on the field. And I don't know what's going to happen when it comes to Cameron Brate. He just kind of digressed in a way this past season, and they're going to have to find some ways to fill in. OJ Howard didn't pan out. A lot of guys just didn't pan out, and they've got to figure out something with that tight end position. Jared Cook might not be a bad idea. Don't love the quarterback thing. Ryan Griffin's got to go. I don't even know why he's still getting paid by the Bucs at all.
She's going after your QB3.
Sorry, guys. You asked for a loaded opinion here. My favorite thing about the whole battle plan is draft pick NDSU Christian Watson. Let's go.
Yeah.
If they could get him in the second round at 59, which I don't think is crazy, by the way, at all. But if they could get him in the late second round, that would be awesome.
I think it's so doable, and it's just they need to make it work. But yeah, other than that, definitely love the battle plan. This is coming from somebody who's like
Other than
wrote out half of
Other than everything.
Other than Ryan Griffin.
and
get rid of Griff. Like he can go do some time in Cali before he calls it a career.
you
Like
think he'll join Russell Wilson up in Colorado?
send him somewhere, just not here.
Nah, this is the funniest comment we've ever had on this show because it's off the Immuni Financial ad read, which after every ad read, Scott goes, John, we got to make it up to Colorado.
Everyone's going to Colorado with Scott.
Oh my goodness.
Benjamin,
I
the rumor that Russell Wilson made it up to Colorado.
No, with the Immuni
Incredible.
Financial, if he's been using them or his contract for the last few years, he probably did.
Oh.
Absolutely outstanding. Russell Wilson did make it up to Colorado.
Do we have
it's
immunity
not
today?
it's not an Immuni Financial day, but I feel like I might just need to play it.
Probably should. I mean,
That's
I like the
incredible.
Juju pick though a lot. Because I don't, the wide receiver 3 and 4 slot was just a hot mess this season. And of course I was majorly rooting for 2 guys in that group and it just didn't pan out. So I think that would be very helpful. I think his size, his capability, and that outburst that he brings in the wide receiver position would be really nice. We don't know what it's going to look like when it comes to that outburst.
we don't need another Pittsburgh receiver causing outbursts at the
Not
position.
that kind of outburst. The outburst
do.
of just like pure athleticism.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Do you see our
Yeah,
traffic
very
that month?
athletic.
We definitely do.
Oh my God! Yeah, right.
Yeah. And
Start
Kasey, I think
TikToking on the Saints Fleur-de-lis in the middle of the field. We're good.
Yeah.
We're golden.
No.
and
We'll
Kasey,
make sure to add that to his contract. No leaving the fields,
right.
or removing your uniform in the middle of a game.
Yeah, and
But-
Kasey, I think you touched on kind of where I was going with the battle plan. So given the fact that I wasn't going after a more established quarterback and the idea would be that Kyle Trask in the back half of the year, we'd see what do we have with him. I wanted to make sure that some of the questions that you've seen with other young quarterbacks over the last few years, I think the Giants are a great example with Daniel Jones, where he's in year 5 and they're like, well, what do we have if he gets weapons? I wanted to make sure that question could be answered very early with Trask. So you have Mike Evans, you have Chris Godwin, you have Juju, and you have Christian Watson, and then Jared Cook blocking issues aside, you've got 5 playmakers that he can work with. So you hope by the end of the year, you have a really good idea of what you have with him, and then allows you to go into 2023 with a really good idea of what we need to do at the quarterback position.
And I definitely agree with that. A lot of my harp on Trask is not only because I absolutely hate UF, it's because like you come in and you compete with a guy like Felipe Franks, and it just kind of
Kasey wants them to trade with. Kasey wants them to trade with the Saints to get Blake Bortles back because he's the only UCF. She's at this point, she wants Dante Culpepper out of retirement to play for any UCF quarterback.
I'll take anybody outside of the UF. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to get so much crap for this. But aside from that,
FSU fans will love it.
So Damian,
I'm
Pierce
just thinking if they go if she goes after Blake Bortles, you're just going down Jacksonville quarterback, history, right? Especially with Leftwich at the offensive coordinator.
Kasey, please tell me what are your thoughts on this 3rd round pick, Damian Pierce? What are your thoughts on that?
No, we got to save it for Scott. Save it on another show.
Don't
save
set
it for
me up,
Scott.
JC.
We still got to talk about
friends. Here's the thing with the Trask, though. You were competing against Felipe Franks. Felipe had a lot of games where it was just kind of like, the chest pain. I feel for all the UF fans that had to sit at the patio here in Tampa Bay and really hope that something better was going to progress. But having weapons, yes, I think that's going to really truly show us what can come of it. What I didn't love, though, is that this is the guy that you invested in and drafted. And in some of the fourth quarter games where they really could have given him a chance to just throw one freaking pass, they gave it to Blaine Gabbert, who didn't need the reps. That was an opportunity missed, in my opinion. That was kind of he's really not quite ready yet. And to go from 0 games to get 1 rep to all of a sudden playing, half of a season or jumping in and switching out with Blaine Gabbert, it doesn't particularly add up for me. I just usually feel like there's more strides of faith before somebody starts coming in with a bigger opportunity there.
Yeah, I totally get where you're coming from on that. I think for me, it's a complete change of where the roster and where the organization is versus where they're going, right? Last year, you're not putting Trask in that situation. You're not rostering him on game day because you're in win now mode. You're not in win now mode at this point. You're in let's learn how we can get to win now mode. And that's where you give him those opportunities. But I totally understand where you're coming from on that one.
Yeah.
That's
and by the way, for
people, Dameon Pierce, no.
Josh had Dameon Pierce in his mock draft to the Bucs in their late 3rd round pick. It's a good pick, and we'll let Scott harp on it tomorrow because I know he'll want to. The absolute hater for no reason at all that Scott is of Dameon Pierce. Shake my head. Thank you so much for coming on, Josh Queipo, ladies and gentlemen, making his Pewter Report podcast debut. This man is writing articles at the speed of sound. It is incredible, and we are going to try and keep putting as many up as we can, especially over this free agency offseason period. He's going to answer as many of your questions as possible. He had one up yesterday about the dead cap situation. He will continue to put out his articles this week to prep you for free agency next week. Nobody doing it better right now, and so we appreciate you. Thank you so much for jumping in here, Josh.
Thanks, guys.
Yes.
Absolutely. Josh Queipo, ladies and gentlemen, as JC sends him out with some applause. I've got to mention, speaking of applause, let's give a round of applause here for our friends over at Pin Chasers, because Pin Chasers, what's great about them is that it's bowling, food, and fun for your whole family. You can jump into bowling leagues, including the Pewter Report Bowling League, birthday parties, there's team building, fundraisers, and there's 3 different locations. I was at one the other night and there were like 25 people in line. It's a big location. So they are absolutely bumping on the weekends. It's awesome. But Pin Chase is a place you can go with the whole family. The food is outstanding. They've got like all day breakfast thing going on. They got an all you can eat pizza night. I mean, look at the pizza on the screen. My mouth is literally watering right now looking at that pizza. And so it's great stuff from our friends at Pin Chasers. Make sure you check them out at one of their 3 locations there in Zephyr Hills, Tampa, or Midtown and Veterans, and down in Tampa. It's great stuff, and hopefully you get a chance to take your family there as well to check out all that they offer. Okay, crew, let's wrap it up with this. Aaron Rodgers going back to the Packers. Not many people having a rougher start to the week than Ian Rappaport, who reported – I was told the Dalton Schultz thing. I think he jumped the gun on that a little bit, although it did end up being true. He jumped the gun on the Chris Godwin tag by several hours and actually had to take back the report and basically reiterate what everybody had been saying for a while, that they were just working, and if they didn't get to a deal by the deadline, they would tag Godwin. Thanks, we knew that. And then he said Aaron Rodgers reported contract terms, and Rodgers and Pat McAfee both refuted those terms, despite the fact that McAfee is boys with Ian Rappaport and has him on his show sometimes twice a week. So it's a little bit of an interesting dynamic there. But bottom line, Rodgers is going back to the Packers. The NFC, with Russell Wilson going out to the Broncos, looks like it's going to be Rams and Packers, with the Cowboys kind of mixing in there. And then we'll talk about the Bucs in a second. We only have a couple minutes left in the show. I want to say this very quickly. There are, thankfully not in this chat, y'all have been great, but there are some people who cannot do basic logic reasoning when it comes to Russell Wilson, and thinking that the Bucs were not competitive for his services. The Broncos have a better package to be able to offer because they have the 9th pick in the draft and are less likely to have the 32nd pick in the draft, for example, next year than the Bucs would be if the Bucs got Russell Wilson. Just reality. They play in a super tough division. It's a smart gamble by Seattle to think it could be better. They could still be like 3rd or 4th in that division, and probably will be. So it's a very smart trade by Seattle. Denver was an obvious partner if they wanted to trade Russell Wilson. The Bucs obviously were not. Then there's the most important factor. Russell Wilson has a no trade clause, and he wanted to stay on the West Coast. He wanted to play out West. The Broncos were his top choice from the very beginning. When Seattle first approached him about it at the beginning of the offseason, that's where he wanted to go, and that hasn't changed at all through the process. Multiple people reporting that. It was never going to happen, Russell Wilson to the Bucs. He was off the table for the Bucs, period, end of story. So we don't need to revisit it. We don't need to talk about it on future podcasts. But I'll say this, Kasey, I'll go to JC wrap things up. What Kasey happens now with the NFC, you look at the state of things. You see, obviously, the Rams are prepping to load up. It looks like the Packers are going to have to make some cuts, but they're going to have a competitive roster. And obviously the 2-time MVP back at quarterback. We know about their playoff struggles. Everybody is probably going to list those in the chat. I found that out on Twitter today when I said the Packers could contend for the NFC. No, they can't do that. Rodgers there. And then the Cowboys, we'll see what happens with their offseason, but it seems like they're cutting half their good players. So that's a problem. NFC, the Bucs, what do you see? Where's their place in this whole madness?
You know, The hardest part is, I mean, what Devontae Adams went on the franchise tag a couple hours ago as well, and then this.
Did it officially? I didn't. Yeah, I haven't seen. I'm sure he did.
That one got announced. So now you have Devontae Adams back as well as Aaron Rodgers. I don't know why I almost called him Patrick Mahomes. Aaron Rodgers, and you can't overlook what they did as a duo with the fact that they didn't have too many key pieces to help them move along. They had just enough. So depending on what their moves are with free agency and heading into the draft, the Packers are going to be contenders next year to really kind of make people pay for it. Rams, I'd really have to look into some of the contracts of people that they're going to get back. But, this whole create the best team in the league is just translated from the NBA into the NFL, and people are going to do what they can to stay on certain teams to chase championships. Hence, the Bucs with the 22 starters last season. So I think we kind of have to call it what it is now. The Bucs are going to be rebuilding, whether they like it or not. It's no longer a polish. So I would kind of still lead them into the middle of the pack. You really just need a decent quarterback if you continue to have these weapons at wide receiver and everyone stays healthy. But it's just such a risky gamble when it comes to that injury concept and maintaining your defense, because at the end of every game, it's the defense that really pulls through. So I could see the Bucs really coming in at the middle of the pack if they make very significant offseason moves and make sure that defense stays pretty strengthened and they kind of level out averagely offensively, and we keep the weapons that the Bucs have, then maybe a little bit above the middle of the pack. But right now, I just really see the middle with where they're at and rebuilding.
Yeah, JC, 10 seconds. Deshaun Watson, it could have happened to the Bucs. 10 seconds. We're wrapping up the show.
Well,
I gotta go.
Apparently, Tom Pelissero was reporting that he will plea on the 5th. So he's going to be having his
legalities situated.
Legalities presented on the Friday, and who will plead the 5th. So who knows? We'll see.
We'll see. We'll talk about it tomorrow too. Scott and I are going to talk about it on tomorrow's podcast. Lots to talk about. And we got Matt Matera breaking down his Bucs battle plan as well tomorrow. So it should be a great show in the pod. As always, 4 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. We'll break it all down. To everybody, make sure you hit the like button before you go out of the chat. Hit the thumbs up. Give us some love. Subscribe if you're not to the Pewter Report podcast. It's great stuff. We're live every weekday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 4 p.m. Eastern. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe. Thanks so much, everybody, for listening to another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.